Welcome to the Cinematic Explainer. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the chilling realities, the famous inmates, and the lingering mysteries of the infamous prison known simply as The Rock. For 29 years, it stood as the ultimate symbol of American justice, or, depending on how you look at it, American cruelty. It's one of those places that has totally captured our collective imagination, right? Just a jagged rock rising out of the San Francisco Bay, constantly shrouded in fog and whispered legends. Well, we are going to explore what actually went on inside those concrete walls. We're peeling back the Hollywood myths to reveal a truth that is frankly much darker and far more fascinating.
So here is the big question. Did anyone ever truly escape Alcatraz? For nearly 3 decades, officials swore up and down that the island was completely inescapable. They built their entire reputation on it, claiming that the physical environment itself was the ultimate warden. But as you'll see, an absolutely astonishing piece of evidence recently threw that certainty into doubt, reopening a cold case the FBI had closed a long time ago. Now, to really understand the magnitude of this question, we have to look at what exactly these guys were trying to escape from. Just take a look at this. In 2013, the San Francisco Police Department received a letter that sent absolute shockwaves to the law enforcement community. It read, "My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962 with my brother Clarence and Frank Morris. I'm 83 years old and in bad shape. I have cancer. Yes, we all made it that night, but barely." Now, what's really wild about this is that the FBI lab actually tested this letter for DNA, fingerprints, and handwriting. The results? Totally inconclusive. It wasn't a definitive yes, but crucially, it wasn't a definitive no either. This chilling letter, supposedly from one of the vanished escapees, forces us to look back at how Alcatraz became such a terrifying, supposedly escape-proof fortress in the first place.
All right, let's get right into Section 1, the ultimate fortress, and unpack exactly why Alcatraz was chosen to hold the worst of the worst.
Picture this. It's the 1930s, and America's facing a massive crime wave. Bank robbers and gangsters are basically becoming celebrities. The government desperately needed a last resort prison to hold the absolute worst of the worst, the guys who literally couldn't be controlled anywhere else, and they needed a location that did the heavy lifting for them. Situated just 1.25 miles from shore, the waters of the San Francisco Bay are notoriously treacherous. We're talking strong, unpredictable currents that can pull you straight out into the Pacific Ocean. And the temperature? A freezing 50 to 55 degrees Fahrenheit all year round. Prison officials calculated that a man would succumb to hypothermia in roughly 20 minutes, which is way before he could ever swim to the mainland.
But before it ever held notorious gangsters, the island actually spent over 80 years as a formidable military fort and dungeon. Back in the 1850s, the U.S. Army built a military fortress there to protect the bay during the gold rush. Then, by 1861, right during the Civil War, it became a military prison, holding Confederate sympathizers down in these dark, damp basement dungeons. It wasn't until August of 1934 that the Department of Justice stepped in, modernized the facility, added tool-proof steel, and officially opened it as a maximum security federal penitentiary.
Moving on to Section 2, Life in Alcatraz, the brutal daily routine that literally broke men's minds.
Imagine being locked inside a room that's just 5 by 9 feet. To put that into perspective, that's roughly the size of a standard walk-in closet. Inmates were confined to these primitive, tiny cells for 16 to 23 hours every single day. They were stripped of all privacy and all dignity. You essentially had a fold-up bed, a small desk, a wash basin, and a toilet right on the back wall, completely visible to the guards patrolling the corridors.
And the routine? Absolutely unforgiving. This relentless, undeviating discipline pushed so many prisoners straight into stir-crazy madness. In the early years, they enforced a strict code of silence. Inmates literally couldn't even speak to each other. A prisoner count was taken every 30 minutes, keeping everyone in this state of constant, nerve-wracking surveillance. They had to flush their toilets with salt water. And get this, hot water wasn't even installed until the early 1960s, just shortly before the prison closed. The psychological toll was so severe that one former inmate reported that 14 prisoners went violently insane in a single year.
Which brings us to Section 3, the worst of the worst, where infamous inmates were completely stripped of their power.
You see, the brutal system of Alcatraz was designed to completely break even the most powerful men. Take Al Capone, the fearsome Chicago mob boss. At his previous prison, the Atlanta Penitentiary, he practically lived like a king, buying off guards to just continue running his rackets from the inside. But when he arrived at Alcatraz, the warden made it crystal clear there would be no special treatment here. Capone just became inmate 85. Stripped of his influence and suffering from untreated syphilis, his mental health rapidly deteriorated. He was reduced to performing menial jobs, and famously, he spent his recreation time playing the banjo in the prison shower room. The great empire builder was completely diminished and isolated.
And Capone definitely wasn't the only famous name on the roster. You had Robert Stroud, popularized by Hollywood as the Birdman of Alcatraz. But in reality, he was a highly dangerous inmate who murdered a guard and spent 17 years on the Rock, mostly in extreme solitary confinement. And by the way, he was never actually allowed to keep birds there. Then there was Alvin Creepy Karpis. Declared public enemy #1 by J. Edgar Hoover himself, Karpis ended up being the longest-serving Alcatraz inmate, spending 26 years there. And George Machine Gun Kelly, a terrifying kidnapper and bank robber who, ironically, became a model prisoner. These men were the absolute worst of the worst, yet on Alcatraz, they were just numbers, strictly controlled by the guards.
Now for the big one, Section 4, the Great 1962 Escape. The night that defied this inescapable system.
Behind these walls, an incredibly ingenious and completely silent preparation was underway. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, John and Clarence, spent months slowly, quietly chiseling away the salt-damaged concrete around the air vents in their cells. Their ingenuity is just mind-blowing. They stole spoons from the dining hall and soldered them using silver from a dime. They improvised a motorized drill from a stolen vacuum cleaner motor. And to mask the sound of all this drilling, Morris played the accordion during the prison's music hour. In a secret workshop above the cell block, they glued over 50 stolen raincoats together to craft a makeshift raft and life vests. And, to buy themselves a head start, they sculpted incredibly lifelike dummy heads out of plaster, soap, and real human hair swept up from the barbershop.
Let's walk through the timeline of that fateful night, June 11, 1962. At 9:30 p.m., the lights went out. Morris and the Anglins placed those dummy heads in their beds, perfectly fooling the guards conducting the night counts. They squeezed through their widened air vents into an unguarded utility corridor. Now, a fourth accomplice, Alan West, couldn't get his vent open in time and was actually left behind. The three remaining men climbed a network of pipes to the roof, popped open a ventilator, and slid down a 50-foot smoke shack to the ground. By 10 p.m., they launched their makeshift raft into the dense, cold fog of the bay.
So what actually happened next? Well, it remains one of America's greatest mysteries. The FBI investigation, which wrapped up in 1979, officially concluded that the escapees likely drowned in the cold bay. They cited remnants of the raincoat raft and a paddle found floating in the water. But despite the official ruling that they perished, the complete lack of bodies, and that mysterious 2013 letter we looked at earlier, yeah, they definitely keep the legend alive. In fact, the U.S. Marshals still keep the case open today.
Let's wrap up with Section 5, Echoes and Legends, the haunting aftermath of the Rock.
Ultimately, it wasn't the escapes that defeated Alcatraz. It was just time, salt, and cold, hard cash. By 1963, 50 years of harsh, salty ocean air had severely eroded the concrete and rusted the steel. It was estimated that it would cost over $4 million to repair the crumbling infrastructure, which was a completely astronomical sum at the time. Plus, operating Alcatraz cost nearly $10 a day per inmate. Compare that to just $3 at a mainland prison like Atlanta. Having to boat in every single drop of fresh water and every single supply was simply too expensive. So, on March 21, 1963, the prison officially closed its doors.
Today, millions of tourists visit the island. And let me tell you, many report chilling paranormal encounters that suggest the suffering never completely faded. Former guards, park rangers, and tourists have reported phantom banjo music echoing directly from Al Capone's old cell, B181. Paranormal investigators have even captured EVPs, electronic voice phenomena, of disembodied voices whispering, "Get out," in the notorious D-Block solitary confinement area. Workers have reported heavy, unexplained breathing in the island's old morgue, along with sudden temperature drops and the terrifying sound of heavy steel cell doors slamming shut when the cell house is completely empty.
Which brings us right back to our ultimate mystery. As you think about the dark truth of America's most dangerous prison, the intense psychological torture, those freezing waters, the daring ingenuity of those men who just refuse to be broken, you have to wonder, did the 1962 escapees survive the freezing waters, ultimately outsmarting the ultimate fortress? Or do their ghosts remain locked in an eternal sentence on Alcatraz, pacing the crumbling concrete alongside Al Capone and the Birdman? I'll leave you with this. Does anyone ever truly escape Alcatraz?